Jesus Christ, what are they doing?
So the stream is about to start. We're live now, so we're looking at a 7:05 start time. But we are live on YouTube now on the community board streaming channel. So yeah, so we'll be starting at around 7:05. So if folks want to just get cozied in, if there's any conversation prior to start time that folks want to engage in, feel free to do so. Hey Natalie, ¿cómo tú estás? Hey Melissa.
Hello, CB12 friends. Good to see you all.
I just want to say, I think we're going to have a nice, enthusiastic group of people joining this meet. I feel like there's a big energy around this. I think the community is really happy to have this conversation. So I expect a large number.
Mm-hmm. Bro, this is the first time I post something on the community board and I get like 200 shares.
Yo, I saw that. It got so backwards with the visuals. I couldn't see it no more.
Yeah. I was like, what is it? Hey, Christina. You're muted.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Welcome. Oh, no. We're good.
Thank you for having me. I'm so Jason Starr, Emily. Oh, I'm so excited about this. Thank you so much for having me.
Friends together. I need to get some books in my background. Very studious over there.
Oh, I thought you had some personal growth plans behind you right there.
I wish.
So I recently, and Jason Starr was part of my law school class this year, and this was my background. And I swear to God, like my husband would switch up the books every once in a while and make them really weird every once in a while. Like we had this whole subculture of New York.
I think like my computer glitched or something. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Computer
Now we can, yeah.
Yeah. So Emily, this is a cool feature that as a disruptor I've learned. So I don't need share screening credentials, but I could put it on my camera. You see that?
Yeah, that's dope.
Our voices will not be silenced.
Yo, that's awesome.
Yeah. Welcome.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Hey, Brad Usher.
Hey, Jason Starr.
Long time no see.
I don't need to be here.
Yeah, I don't. How are you?
I am good. Yes, I'm not really State Senator Liz Krueger, but see if I can figure out how to change that. So.
For folks, for the participants, if you have a question, just ask it in the Q&A, and I'll respond to it, all right? But I'm gonna take it off now, Emily. But whenever you want me to share this, I could just screen share so it could look bigger and it could be on everybody's screen. So just let me know when you want me to share this.
Okay, sounds good. Do you want me to like send you a message in the chat? Or?
No, or just text me.
All right, sounds good.
All right, so we're starting in 5 minutes. Today, Francisco, if you want to let us know what we're doing today.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Today we're going to talk about cannabis and legislatively what is happening with the topic, with any proposed bills, and we have some amazing people that's kind of help us walk through some of those muddy waters. Jason Starr is co-moderating this with me, and he's gonna give us a nice deck to get a better understanding of what's going on at the state level as far as the cannabis bill. Take it away, Jason.
Not yet. We're not starting yet.
Oh, no? Oh,
yeah. We're gonna start at we're gonna start around 7:05 when we have quorum.
Got it. Okay. Okay, so then I can elaborate a bit. So then after Jason Starr does his thing, we're gonna have some public advocacy groups who are gonna join us as well. I'm sorry, I don't know the names off the top. Domingo, hold on.
Yeah, so we have Emily, we have Melissa Moore, we got Emily Ramos, Melissa Moore, we have Christina Bucalo. Sorry if I'm chopping anybody's name up, let me know. And yeah, so they'll be providing important feedback from advocates. As we all know, society moves at the pace that the advocates push it. So we can't expect good intentions being enough without the advocates figuring out where the loopholes are in good intentions.
Yep, and then we're gonna do a Q&A, so people would have the opportunity to ask Jason the question and Emily and the rest of the group questions on some of the things that they spoke about. After the Q&A, we're gonna move on to the local state officials, and they're gonna have up to 5 minutes to tell us what the cannabis bill is on their front, on their side.
Their disagreements, what they agree with, what they don't agree with, and their proposed action steps.
Yep. And after the wonderful people that we elected get through, we'll have another Q&A session and then move on to business as usual, which is old business, right? New business?
Yeah.
And then adjournment?
Correct. We'll create a space for some of our local partners to make any announcements if they have any.
Awesome.
What's up, Orlando? What's up, Nobles?
Hey, Domingo.
What's up, Ashley?
Hi, everyone. Good evening.
Hey, guys. We're climbing up like the GME stock. We're up to 37 participants.
Yeah. Hey, Paradise Phoenix.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good.
You have quorum now, Domingo. Perfect.
All right, perfect. So we'll still waiting for a 7:05 start time. So yes, we'll give folks at least 2 more minutes to start coming in and joining the conversation. Francisco, you're here twice. You sent somebody the panelist link?
No, I don't believe so.
Oh.
Let me see what's happening.
But yeah, welcome to Community Board 12, the Business Development Committee. We'll be engaging in a conversation around cannabis, the proposed bills that are out there. Jason Starr will lead this conversation and speak on unpacking what the current bill means for establishing businesses, the pros and the cons, followed by the advocates, followed by 2 to 3 questions, followed by our elected officials, and followed by full Q&A. Okay, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them now, because when we start, we're going through. Oh, and by the way, my name is Domingo Estevez. I'm the chair of business development. This conversation will be co-moderated by my colleague and friend, Francisco Lopez, a committee member. And it's 7:05. So as you all know, what today's agenda is, but prior to that, for the chair report, all I'm gonna ask for is, and all I'll be reporting on is, I was sent a new list. So we have new members in the committee, welcome. And just moving forward, what we try to do in this committee is get all of our members to actually engage with community business, meaning if you have anything you're interested on, this is the committee where you'll be able to co-chair anything that's pertaining to business development, and I'll co-chair and co-moderate with any of the committee members to make sure that your interests are also being met by the committee. With that being said, the first person who requested this was Francisco, and his choice was cannabis, and the business is cannabis. So this is how we got here today. But with that, I finished my chair report, and Francisco, it's all yours.
Hey, good evening, guys. Happy Tuesday. So yeah, going off what Domingo said, we're here to talk about cannabis and get a better understanding of what cannabis is looking like in the state level. How further along are we with the cannabis bill? What's in the cannabis bill? Get a better understanding of what that looks like. We're going to speak to some of our local and state officials, and the wonderful Mr. Jason Starr is going to give us a presentation on the cannabis bill itself. He's one of the proponents there of it. We also have Senator Kruger and her representative Brad Usher, who's here to tell us about what's the cannabis looking like on their end as well. And then we'll have some Q&A. But for now, we'll start with Mr. Jason.
Thank you, Francisco and Domingo, for the invitation, and all of the wonderful people who are joining in the conversation today, and most importantly to the viewers, members of the community board, other folks in the community who are interested in this topic. I think it's very exciting, and hopefully today's conversation will give you just enough to start asking the right questions, getting connected to the right networks, sort of understanding this huge topic that is so critical for us to get right in New York, but also has so much opportunity if we actually do. So I'll just give you a little bit of background about myself. Again, my name is Jason. I am a human rights lawyer by trade, but an educator at heart. Before I moved to New York, I was a high school teacher. And so, public education, community education, civics is really core to who I am and what I think I can contribute. So it's just really great to be here in that frame with everyone today. I started practicing law right around the time that a lot of research around stop and frisk and the racial disparities in stop and frisk, and research around the racial disparities in marijuana enforcement and the relationship between those two really started to take hold in the city. And so I got to be on the front end of a lot of really great work dealing with enforcement, and also kind of grounded my career in this opportunity to look at marijuana justice through the framework of restorative racial justice and economic justice for a community. And so I started on the advocate side, as Domingo said, working with colleagues across the state, like Melissa at DPA and Cassandra Frederic, who's now the executive director, and working on the medical program, and also the first couple of drafts of thinking about how do we like create a bill in an effort to make legalization an actual issue in New York. And this is the early days. This is really before Washington, before Colorado, before we had any kind of reference points for what marijuana legalization might look like. And then I actually went into state government in 2017 to work on civil rights policy issues generally, and had an opportunity to work on marijuana from the perspective of a regulator or potential regulator and policymaker. So it's really interesting to see both sides of the work. But I think most importantly, what I really got from it is this real community of people. And if you were on a little bit before we actually got started, you may have saw a lot of us sort of just reconnecting because there's been a lot of work, I think, that people maybe haven't seen. And it's not just like public policy people and elected officials, but it's like professionals and entrepreneurs who are actually working in the business right now. Folks who are doing really interesting work on business models and types that can be applied to the industry, that are building networks and communities, particularly amongst small entrepreneurs, community members who are most impacted, who we know are going to have the greatest barriers to entry in the market. All of that community has been working for so long. And so, for myself, I think that this industry and this work is so exciting because it is an opportunity for community to really shine and for the value of community to really be centered in this like new framework that we're creating together. This conversation is going to be like a one-on-one. If you're already familiar with like legalization efforts or the policy frameworks that are out there, if you're already familiar with like the cannabis industry, it may seem a little foundational, but I want to sort of take for granted that for a lot of people, this may be the first time that you're sort of seeing a lot of this information presented. And we don't want people to leave sort of feeling overwhelmed by, a sort of collegiate level dive into this stuff without making sure we have some foundational understandings. And I want to just sort of say there's a great group of contributors. And so while I hope to help facilitate the conversation and maybe just set it up a little bit, really what I hope I share with you just kind of instigates you for the Q&A, whether you have questions for the advocates who are working on the bill and the legislative effort, whether you have questions for the elected officials about, where they need to be holding the line, or more information that you need as a constituent as you go about, sort of understanding how you're going to move forward with your plan to learn more about the industry and position yourself to potentially take advantage of the opportunities. So all that said, two kind of main points. The first one is, and I'll keep saying this, this is a huge undertaking. It's something that the state has not endeavored to do, really in a generation, create an entirely new consumer market. And not only do that, but create a market that accounts for, 90 plus years of prohibition. That means 90 plus years of no sort of consumer research and development, 90 plus years of a lack of information or misinformation in terms of the public. Sort of constellation, if you will, of criminal justice impacts that mean that the folks who need to benefit most from the new market, both in terms of the opportunities to participate and in terms of the revenues that are generated because of prohibition and criminalization, have, again, the greatest barriers. So we have to sort of create a market. It's got to be sustainable. We have to transition folks from the informal market to the formal market. We have to do that in a way that's equitable. So I don't envy our policymakers and the folks who are ultimately going to have to create that framework because it's difficult. Some of the sort of demands around how do you actually build a market that's not too big, that's not too small, that makes sure that there's robust opportunities, but also make sure that those businesses are going to be able to sustain themselves over the long haul, and those investments of resources and of time and of energy and of courage actually reap rewards, not just in the immediate future, but down the road for building generational wealth. And we're drawing on a slate where there's a lot of variables and we just don't know the answers to. So how you measure consumption, how much marijuana is consumed in New York, how much needs to be produced to meet the demand, how much revenue might this a fully realized market actually generate? How quickly will the informal market transition to the formal market, if it transitions at all? When will federal descheduling happening? And what will happen to a market that we create in New York that's wholly intrastate once the prohibitions of interstate commerce come down and you're able to engage in commerce, cannabis commerce across state lines? How long will it take entrepreneurs to obtain capital and technical assistance? And how much money is needed on the front end in order for that to happen? These are all questions that we can make some assumptions about, but that we don't know, but that are really important for whatever legislative or I should say policy framework comes out of the energy in Albany now. But policymakers aren't working on a blank slate. We have two proposals in New York, the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act that I think was first introduced in 2012. Correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa. 2013, and has been workshopped. I'm sorry, there you go, Brad. Prime sponsored by Senator Kruger and Assemblywoman Peoples-Stokes. And the Cannabis Regulation and Taxation Act, which is the governor's proposal that first came out in 2018. But you have 15 states plus DC. You have states like Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and California, who we think of as the pioneer states in terms of regulation. Their market is very different, but they do have had legalized adult use cannabis for a while. And so we can learn from some of what has happened over the course of 5-6 years as their market has grown and developed. Massachusetts was the first state to have a dedicated social equity program. So I think it's very important for us to look at what's happening in Massachusetts, especially around social equity applicants and the development of that program. And Illinois, Illinois is the first big state to legalize via legislation, meaning the legislature went in, passed a bill that the Illinois governor signed, as opposed to Colorado, Washington, Oregon, who had ballot measures. The voters put it in front of the legislature and required them to act. So a lot of activity, but everyone's still trying to figure out some of these fundamental questions as everyone sort of state by state tries to improve and iterate on what happened before, while also accounting for their own, particular circumstances. And then the big question is the federal side of the house. So, when we were talking in 2016 and 17, there definitely was some federal legislation out there, right? Some trying to address issues with banking. Some legislation is trying to legalize having a wholly intrastate market, and even some legislation moving towards descheduling, but no go in the Senate. And so no go really in terms of planning for federal descheduling. Well, that has changed significantly, not only with the MORE Act passing in the House, but also yesterday, I think, or Monday, don't know what day of the week it is, the majority leader, Chuck Schumer, sort of putting marijuana really on the table as a Senate priority with Senators Booker and Senator Wyden leading that effort. So I think that means that it has real legs to move, and certainly has enough legs for entrepreneurs to start to think about what it means for marijuana to be federally descheduled. And the second point I make is being involved in the cannabis industry means being involved in cannabis advocacy. You can't really set yourself up for being in this market without having some indication and being involved in making sure that the framework that the policymakers deliver to you is conducive to meeting your needs as someone who wants to enter the market. And so you don't necessarily, have to sort of go to Albany and stand with the signs if that's not your jam. But I think, advocacy in its many different forms is really important. So it's great to have, so many advocacy colleagues to help you sort of understand and learn ways to plug into that effort. Now, as I close, I want to just kind of give you some grounding in questions that I would ask, or ways that I would look at the proposals that speak to folks who have interest in getting into the business. And I'm gonna make this real easy. There are 4 places that I think you should really be focused on in the course of this conversation and discussion, and in subsequent conversations and discussion. The one is market structure. And sometimes you hear, we call it market architecture. That is, what does the actual license market look like? And you probably have heard, or maybe you've heard this phrase, a prohibition on vertical integration. That means that no licensee in the supply chain can participate in more than one area. And that's really important because it breaks up the supply chain and it makes sure that someone with a lot of money can't come in and control the product from seed to sale. They can't grow and process and distribute and retail. Because if we allow that, then it significantly reduces the number of opportunities that one has to actually get a license and participate. So if you want to grow, you can't process and retail dispense. If you want to process and you can't retail dispense and grow, and so on and so forth. But it also means a lot of other license types that allow you to get in with lower barriers to entry, lower capital requirements on the front end, lower sort of other regulatory requirements that allow you to set up businesses that are viable, that may require licenses. The second one is front end equity. That is priority licensing, meaning if you come from a community that's most impacted, if you satisfy the definition of a social equity applicant, is there a priority for you to get your license? And is there a priority for you to get capital and also technical assistance? How are you going to get into the market early? And what is the framework of the policy doing to make sure it stands you up, it meets your needs before the needs of well-funded, capitalized participants who have not been impacted by the war on drugs? And then there's back-end equity. That's what happens with the revenue. Is there dedicated funding for community reinvestment? And does part of that dedicated funding include ongoing capital support and ongoing operating support for new businesses and existing businesses? And the last piece is recriminalization of the communities most impacted. What we don't want to see is a framework for legalized capital cannabis, right? And then a whole lot of public policy and law that still criminalizes possession, consumption, et cetera. Because what we have seen in other states is, despite legalization, the activity and conduct that still remains criminal, of course, it disproportionately affects the same communities that legalization is supposed to impact. And if you're still being recriminalized, how can you be an effective market participant? And so we have to make sure that what we leave unregulated doesn't remain the target of hypercriminalization and targeting. And those are just, so let's sort of think about those 4 kind of big questions as you, again, evaluate the proposals that are out there, as you talk to your policymakers, your elected officials, and as you engage with the advocates and experts on the panel today. And the last thing I'll say is the market opportunity. I think a lot of folks sort of look and think, we grow cannabis, we process it and turn it into cannabis product, whether that's, flower that you can smoke or vape, whether that's edible products, whether that's a variety of other kinds of products that you can consume, and then retail dispensing. But there is just so much more that's there. And sometimes you'll hear it categorized as plant touching and non-plant touching. And so we have, of course, the cultivation opportunities to grow cannabis. You have the processing and distribution to turn that raw cannabis flower into cannabis products, a wide variety of cannabis products. And then you have the retail dispensing to get that to consumers. But you also have, so many other license and permitting types, special use permits for entertainment venues, catering permits for consumption of cannabis products, on-site consumption permits to create lounges and safe consumption spaces, nurseries for seeds, co-ops and crafts. And I know Emily's going to talk a lot about the opportunity for cooperative ownership in this industry and in New York City specifically right now. And you also have non-plant touching and professional services, legal, tax, government relations, community engagement and public relations. We're talking to the community board now. I know some of you have been to those meetings when folks apply for a liquor license, right? All of those kinds of professionals are going to be necessary in this business. Marketing, digital strategy, research, this opportunity to really sort of account for the disparity in medical cannabis and the accessibility and availability of medical cannabis to communities that have been targeted by the war on drugs. There's a lot of opportunity there. Obviously tech, folks are working on point of sale software, but also startups. And so there is a whole kind of universe that's available. And I think, what's really important for us to remember is that there has to be good policy where there are opportunities embedded, and those opportunities are explicitly prioritized for communities most impacted and individuals from those communities. And there have to be guardrails that guard against big, well-capitalized, well-financed entities from being able to participate, particularly in New York, which some folks estimate to be the biggest market in terms of consumption in the world. The second thing is we know what we're up against. We know who's interested in being in this market in New York. We know why they want to be here. But community has the ability to innovate, to create new kinds of businesses that satisfy the political mandate, which is not to create the biggest market that makes the most money without regard to who's benefiting, but to really meet this requirement that the only way we can legislate and the only sort of mandate we have to legislate is to legislate in a way that addresses the harm caused by the war on drugs on communities, and not just through sort of the criminal justice responses, but also the economic justice responses. And so the third thing I'll say is, my suggestion is build community now. I've come across, again, so many wonderful collectives. And I know I'm going to put one in the chat for a conversation that's happening over the course of the next 4 Thursdays with a group called Revel, which is a sort of collective of small business entrepreneurs. It's where I met Christina, I think, and folks who have experience, but also who want to get connected to people who want to be in the business, but who want to do it the right way, and who want to do it in a way that makes sure that opportunity is for people in New York, is for community, and gives folks the space to be creative, innovate, and learn. And so I will sort of stop there, turn it back over to Domingo and Francisco, and really look forward to hearing your questions and continuing this discussion tonight. So thank you.
Perfect timing. Francisco?
Wow, that was powerful, Jason. Thank you. Wow. Okay, so I guess we'll go on to
the advocates now. So Emily,
yes.
We're gonna engage in a conversation now with Emily, with Melissa Moore, and she left. No, she's here. And Christina Bucala on the industry. So now we understand that there's a business about to be rolled out. Talk to us about what's at the advocate stance, and what are you against, what are you for, And what propositions? Is there a new bill that you're supporting? Is there modifications to the old? Like, yeah, just share that with us.
Christina, Melissa, and I are all part of the Start Smart Coalition to legalize marijuana in New York, which is a group of over 200 organizations, nonprofits that are fighting to legalize marijuana in New York with centering community reinvestment, reparative justice, and equity. Christina, Christina or Melissa, would one of you like to start with talking about the legislation?
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you so much for inviting us into the meeting tonight. I'm just super grateful to be with y'all. And you know, as Jason was talking about community, I think that's exactly right. You know, in this space within the advocacy side of things, but then also for folks who are interested in, you know, making a venture into a cannabis business as this moves forward. It, you know, very much to Jason's point, is super important to be connected now and to be organizing with people to make sure that what we actually achieve in terms of passing legalization in New York is responsive to all of the needs that we see very clearly in front of us, both from an equity and a community reinvestment standpoint, but then also just being responsive to the sorts of harms that have been caused by prohibition. And so that's really the point of departure for me and for us. You know, again, I'm Melissa, I'm with Drug Policy Alliance, also with the Start Smart Coalition. If folks want to learn more, you can go to smart-ny.com. That's the website for the campaign. There's a ton of information on there. We can share it out as well over all the channels. But just to start from that place and really ground the conversation, because, you know, much as Jason said, you know, this is about establishing what the framework will be, but that's not disconnected from how we got to this moment, right? And so the fact that New York, during the time that marijuana and cannabis, you know, everybody uses the terms that work for them. You know, a lot of folks still use marijuana because that's what they were calling it at the peak of the marijuana arrest crusade, you know? So that's where I'll stick with, but totally open to whatever folks want to use. But at that moment, the enforcement was incredibly targeted. The enforcement was crystal clear in certain places of the city and definitely not happening in others, right? So as we're talking about, you know, what it is that New York had 800,000 low-level marijuana arrests during a time when the plant was supposedly decriminalized in our state, means that anything we do moving forward has to be responsible and provide restitution for that damage that happened and for that harm that was caused, right? So that's where one of the bright lines and the points of distinction between the bill that Senator Krueger is the prime sponsor on, along with the Majority Leader, Crystal Peoples-Stokes on the Assembly side, the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act really takes that into account and builds out what legalization should look like for New York from that point of departure. Like, how do we address all of the harms of criminalization and be responsible for not just clearing out people's records, that's really important, but then also looking at the impacts that have, you know, challenged people for decades in terms of being able to secure housing, to be able to get stable employment, the child welfare implications, the immigration consequences that people have faced. How do we rectify those situations on the, you know, as part of this effort as well, and central to this effort, not as like a backstop, not as something that we're going to try to circle back to whenever it's convenient at some point, but really recognizing that damage as the foundation for anything that we move forward, right? And then in addition to that, making sure that the equity components are there too from the very start. You know, much like Jason was saying, it's kind of a, you know, like a moot point. If the ship has already sailed, if the whole industry is established, and then at that point, there's funding for, you know, small businesses and minority and women-owned businesses and like family farmers, co-ops, all of these other structures have to also be centered at the very front end, as well as community reinvestment. We know not every single person, you know, like when we're looking at that huge scope of 800,000 arrests, and that's just the criminal legal space, right? Like not every single one of those people wants to be an entrepreneur or wants to be involved in a plant touching business or in this space at all. But that doesn't mean that they weren't directly affected by the marijuana arrest crusade, right? And so when we're talking about the revenue that's going to come in from legal sales, there needs to be that community reinvestment process to channel revenue back. And that's something that the MRTA does that, frankly, the governor's bill that's on the table right now just really falls short in all of those areas. So if we're talking about kind of that checklist that Jason was mentioning, and looking at what ongoing criminalization and enforcement is going to be, the governor's bill manages to actually establish higher and newer penalties in a lot of these areas than what we have now under prohibition, which, from my perspective, is unacceptable. And I'll kick it back to Emily and Christina and see what else y'all want to highlight, because there's a lot to delve into here.
And Melissa, by the way, this is just an intro conversation. We do want to have a follow-up because there's so much to unpack that I felt one meeting wouldn't do it justice. That's why we decided that at this meeting, we'll focus on the business models, the business components, the rhetoric as to how do we put directly impacted communities at the forefront of being able to organize around this industry. And then alongside my colleague, Curtis Young, who's the chair of, he's the chair of our criminal justice committee, public safety, then we'll engage in a deeper conversation and really break out what do we mean by these loaded terms.
Since we're talking about business today, that's what I do. My name is Christina Bucola, and I am a transactional attorney. I've been practicing for 20 years, and I came to the cannabis field in probably 2014. And one of the things that I spent my career doing was helping well-capitalized entities earn even more capital so they could go out and do bigger, better, badder deals. And when it came to cannabis, I saw that there was an incredible delta difference between the types of people who could actually afford to work in the cannabis industry, because it's still a federally illegal substance. What does that mean? That means traditional capital resources for people like going to a bank and getting a loan are not going to be available. But that doesn't change the fact that operating in the cannabis industry can be an incredibly capital intensive activity. When you are talking about growing, when you're talking about processing, these are things that require space and equipment and land and soil and labor. And so when I look at different bills, and I'm concerned about economic justice and equity, I say, what is the license that someone who doesn't necessarily have access to a hedge fund or daddy's bank account, what can they afford reasonably? Because also we have rules around the way you raise money in this country. We have something called the Securities and Exchange Act. And when you give someone a little bit of your company, chances are that is the securities, and that subjects you to a whole new set of rules. So we have to be really conscious about the way entrepreneurs in the space and legacy market participants who are moving over into the regulated space are able to get capital and deploy that capital. And one of the most important differences that I'm seeing between the two bills, Governor Cuomo's bills, which is the CRTA, and the bill introduced by Senator Krueger and Assemblymember Crystal People-Stokes, is the type of licenses that are available. There are two types of licenses that are available in the MRTA that I think are going to be instrumental in getting individuals who are social equity applicants and economic equity applicants and members of the legacy market transitioned. And those are for delivery and social consumption, right? Those are two licenses. And when I say that, what do I mean? Delivery. If you've ever participated in the legacy market, you know what delivery is. You place an order, someone comes, you get your delivery. There is a transaction there, delivery. The other one is social consumption. What does that mean? Well, it means that we're now going to legalize a substance, but we have to also provide safe places for people to consume that, right? Because not everybody in New York, certainly not in New York City, not everybody has a private home, not everybody, is able to close a door and consume. So you want to provide environments for people to be able to go and recreate and be adults and consume cannabis in a safe space. And those are two areas that could potentially be the lowest capital entry points for individuals who are social equity applicants and may not have access to that capital. And so I just want to add one other little layer in here that kind of speaks to all points that Jason, and I took notes, Jason, because when Jason Starr speaks, you take notes. Okay, so the idea of front end equity and back end equity, I think we also need to look at who is controlling the program, right? Because who is exercising the master puppeteer strings of the program really does speak to that. And I do think that the MRTA exceeds what the CRTA has, right? Because you're getting input from all these different sources, not all of whom are selected by the governor, and some of whom actually occupy different offices within the existing state government. So I'm here to answer any kind of questions about raising capital, the difficulties around getting licenses, because you can apply for a license, but just because you get it doesn't mean you can fund it. And that is a huge disconnect that we have to be really conscious about when we start setting up our equity programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Marie Ramos Rodriguez. I am a founder and worker owner of Jaime Madre, a women and femme of color marijuana cooperative. I'm also a board member and an elected member of the Advocacy Council for our trade association, which is the New York City network of worker cooperatives. And I'm just a advocate, I would say, revolutionary, born and raised in the Lower East Side and Spanish Harlem. And I'm just here mostly to talk about co-ops. I appreciate everyone highlighting the importance of advocacy. Like Jason said, you can't have a business in the marijuana industry if you're not advocating to shape the industry, because if you wait till after the legislation is passed, we'll most likely be written out of the legislation. There won't be necessarily licenses and provisions in the legislation that provide capital, training, for us to be able to start our own business. I'm very fortunate that, I was guided to go through business incubator programs for cooperatives to help me start my business. And I have the support of the worker cooperative infrastructure that already exists in New York City to be able to support my business with technical, business, legal, and financial assistance for starting my business. New York City does have the largest cooperative community in the US. We are part of multiple larger trade associations, such as the New Economy Coalition, which is a trade association for all types of cooperatives, as well as USFWC, which is the United States Federation of Worker Cooperatives. On the local level, we have, like I mentioned, NICNOC, and we have CNIC, which is the Cooperative Economics Alliance of New York City. These are important because our trade associations provide funding and trainings for our business, which are really helpful. During the height of the pandemic, we were able to access a OSHA training for PPE and knowing how to navigate the COVID crisis, which is super important and integral to everyone's business. If Jason can show the chart, we hosted some marijuana forums last year in collaboration with Assembly members Harvey Epstein and Robert Rodriguez in the Lower East Side and Spanish Harlem. The People's Dispensary has aided our coalition a lot, and has provided amazing tools that they gave us permission to share in our forums. So this chart goes over the different types of businesses that you can have in the marijuana industry that are not necessarily plant touching. So they're ancillary businesses, which means that they're in aligned industries or adjacent industries to the marijuana industry, such as business support, like I mentioned. I believe Christina mentioned marketing. There's businesses such as delivery, which may not necessarily be plant touching, which matters because of the amount of money you need to start up the business, and the cost of the license would be less. These businesses also wouldn't fall under the tax provision that makes your business get taxed so heavily because of the Controlled Substance Act when your business involves an illegal substance. This is also important to cooperatives because you can have any type of business in any of these sectors of the industry and make them a cooperative. My business specifically is a worker cooperative, which means all of the workers are owners of the business. So there's equal profit sharing, democratic decision making, care for co-ops, care for communities such as that, which is super important because, we do this work for the community. And then there's other types of cooperatives such as housing cooperatives, producer cooperatives, which are super important to this industry because producer cooperatives are farming cooperatives. And so you can buy a plot of land, and multiple people can have shared branding and shared marketing, which saves costs, and allows them to have a wider network, and even share processing of what they're growing on their farm. There's also consumer cooperatives, which are similar to grocery co-ops. If you're familiar with Flatbush Food Co-op or Central Brooklyn Food Co-op or Park Slope Food Co-op, it would be similar to that, where the consumers are the owner of your cooperative and you're providing a service to the consumer. There's also marketing co-ops, so you can have shared marketing in any type of sector of the industry, to be able to save cost. A lot of the consumer co-ops utilize share marketing. And then there's a hybrid cooperative, which can be a hybrid of any of those things. So all of these businesses can be a co-op, and that's important just because of the resources that are available in New York City to help fund your co-op, to help incubate your co-op. And then you can also pull funding, with your community. One person may not have $500,000 to buy a plot of land and obtain a license and have the startup costs for their business, but maybe 500 people could come together and put down $1,000, and it opens up the possibilities. So if you have any questions about co-ops or interested in getting involved with our trade association, we have a great series right now, our training co-op series that's talking about how do you build your business model canvas and your bylaws and your membership manual, to help you start your own business. So definitely connect with us. Our page is at Jaime Madre, and I can connect you to those resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. If you can, I don't know if it's possible, but if you can type in some of those websites that people can check out what you spoke of on the answer, maybe.
Yeah, and what we'll also do is everybody registered, so we'll be sending out an email with all the resources mentioned today to everybody who registered via the email that you registered with. So whoever registered, just know that we'll be sending out an email after, let's say, give us a few days, and we'll have it out.
I just add quickly, as Christina was mentioning about the delivery licenses and the social consumption lodges, with advocacy, Massachusetts has been able to propose moratoriums on licenses so that the first 2 years of the licenses being available, they will only be given to equity and legacy applicants, which is amazing, so that they don't have to compete against other businesses and have an opportunity to start and build up their network and capital in the industry before other businesses. So those are some things we should definitely think about. And for transitioning underground and legacy markets into the legal market, they've even considered taxing the unlicensed market as a way to not recriminalize the market. So those are definitely possibilities and things that we can advocate for in the legislation.
Okay, I know we have Senator Jackson, right, Francisco, that has to go.
Yeah, he has a busy schedule, so he wants to go in, say a couple things right before we do Q&A.
Yeah, Senator Jackson.
Senator.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come in. Obviously, this is a very, very important subject, especially when it comes to the governor has basically shown a willingness to move forward with this from a economic point of view. But as you and I know that it's imperative that communities that have suffered as a result of the criminalization benefit from this, and that many people besides the corporate structures receive the type of licenses and income out of this. But obviously the budget is so important the expectation is that down the road, not after the first year, after the second year, but moving forward, there will be a constant flow of a lot of money coming into the state of New York. And obviously, we want the people from our communities that have suffered as a result of that, that have been criminalized, to be able to participate in the economic development of it. So I say to you that right now, there is obviously a bill by People Stokes, who is the majority leader in the New York State Assembly, and Liz Krueger, who is the chair of the Finance Committee. And this is going to be discussed, and I sure hope that this is done this year. Obviously, when there are controversial matters, it normally takes place in the first year or the first 2 years, depending if you're a 4-year body. So it's not coming up as an issue of concern in the year of electoral process. Let me just say that that's very, very important overall. And then number two is that the intricate details have to be worked out very, very closely. I mean, and what we don't want to do is we don't want to go into April 1st and we so far apart, and or things move so quickly that basically the legislation doesn't really meet the needs of what we want. And I say to you that when they last minute, they're coming up with hundreds of pages of documents, you want to be able to read the fine print, because if not, then you're stuck with it if we're going to be voting for it. And so that's very important. I mean, I've experienced that on dealing with other stuff, not relating to cannabis, but with other stuff. But as someone that's from the community, I will be involved with it to the extent that I can with respect to on the committees, and making sure that I come back and report an ongoing basis on a monthly basis, and obviously the advocates, but a report to Community Board 12 as to where is it right now. But let me just say right now, the primary focus is dealing with a lot of stuff. But, as I've said, many people know that my involvement in education and trying to make sure that we have enough money to provide our kids with a good education. But the most important thing right now for me is people aren't evicted from their apartments, and they're not evicted from their homes, become homeless. And then number two, the food lines are so long, we haven't have enough food to feed everyone. And the health is so important, mental health and physical health. And we see that what's happening with that. So that's my primary focus right now, and along within education. This is going to happen. The matter is only when. I sure hope that it starts now, because we don't want it to be spun quickly at the end and not get the things that we need. So I say that to you as someone that lives in the community, grew up in the community as far as New York City, and someone that has smoked marijuana for years when I was in school, but it is what it is. So I commit that I come to you every month with an update. If there is an update, if there's no update, I will tell you, and I'll put it in writing to you.
Thank you so much, Senator Jackson. We will reach out after the call just so we could schedule it and give you, the time so you could be able to provide these updates on a monthly basis.
Thank you, Dominguez, and thank you, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to come in front of you. But this is great, because what you're doing is you're discussing it from a holistic point of view with advocates and everyone, and that just helps to you constantly refocus what we need to do. And you know one thing? You have to then communicate that to us also as legislators. Okay?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Peace and blessings.
I'll be taking 2 questions right now. So Liz, followed by Miriam, and then we'll go Liz and Miriam, and then we'll go into the legislative updates and just being able to get some insight from our legislators.
Thank you. So leaving apart the whole judicial aspect, making sure that people who are currently in jail for things that are about to be decriminalized, and how do we address that? That's more of going to be, I guess, Curtis's issue when his committee takes this up. In terms of the business aspects of it, one of the things that we're seeing in California are, community, legacy, equity businesses who get into the business, and because their business expertise is in a very particular environment, more of the underground environment, not so much in the more regular established commercial environment, they wind up failing and then getting taken over by people who were not harmed, were not negatively impacted by prohibition. And once again, the people who got screwed by the system are not the people who were then making the money from this new way of doing things. And the people who benefited by screwing the people who got screwed in the first place make money again. That is wrong. And how, not just from a criminal justice perspective, but how from a business development perspective, does the state of New York kind of learn from what Massachusetts is doing and learn from some of the negative impacts of what happened both in the Bay Area and in LA? I mean, it's really bad. How do we make sure that our legislation is written in a way, our enabling legislation is written in a way so as not to make those mistakes? It's a tall order. And I do want to say, Liz's legislation is better than Cuomo's. What a surprise.
Thank you, Liz.
Second that.
So I don't know that anyone is really looking to replicate California, right? California does not, people, you know, you'll hear people say, Colorado, California. No, we have learned the mistakes. And part of, I think, is how we differentiate is we fight for the stuff we know that we need now. And so that goes back to the type of licenses, but it also goes back to really committing to funding and incubating those licenses and setting aside those monies, because you can't do this without money. It would be lovely to do this on love and good wishes and support, but that doesn't happen. This runs on money. So you make sure that there is money coming in to fund those programs, and so to set those individuals up for success. And sometimes that looks like the technical assistance or the legal assistance. Sometimes that looks like money, just paying grants and money, actual money. And so I think that under the MRTA, there's far more latitude that is given to the boards that and the groups that are going to be deciding how to deploy this. We'll see even more of that in regulation, right? But we're seeing a very nice framework in the MRTA, which really isn't there in the CRTA. It's just a lot of words that look good together, but then when you start looking at them, they just don't add up. So fighting for it now. And having these conversations like we're having right now, just more of them, and in as many communities as we can.
I would also add on California, you know, amongst people who sort of know the policy, it's like stay away from whatever they're doing in California. But I think to a point that Christina made a little earlier, another issue with California was sort of personnel, and not really any individual personnel, but they really didn't build out the you know, their equivalent of the Office of Cannabis Management with the right personnel, with the right number of personnel to meet the needs that social equity applicants were going to have. They didn't anticipate that well. And so, you know, there were folks picking up the phone and no one was on the other end. And also California had a dual licensing structure. So you get a license from the state, but you also get a license from the locality, which is a terrible idea because, of course, naturally, Sacramento didn't communicate with LA and the Bay Area and everywhere else. And so you also had this situation where there were different regulatory entities doing different things, and it made it really, really difficult, again, for you know, potential licensees who are not used to dealing with government bureaucracy, who may not have that level of familiarity and may have some reticence, right? And lack of trust. So I think those are other things we got to really pay attention to in our legislative framework and policy framework, not just the words on that page, but what is it going to look like when there are people who actually have to take those words and turn them into action, government action.
Okay, perfect.
Right.
And just know that we're on time. So the next question is coming from, you have a minute to make a question or a statement. and it's coming from
Miriam.
Miriam Aristi.
Yep.
Welcome.
Hi.
And she's also a fellow CB9 member. Thank you for sending over a resolution that they passed. And it gives us a good starting point to be able to put something on paper.
Thank you. Yes, I'm here. I wear many hats. My name's Miriam Aristi-Farrer. I co-chair the Health and Environment Committee for Community Board 9, which is just south of Community Board 12. And I'm a medical marijuana patient. I'm a mom, and I'm active. I also have a CBD brand, and I want to echo what Christina said about you have to have incubators, you have to have grants. Part of the reason California businesses failed is because people just got into it because it's cannabis. I want to sell, I want to get in. This is a business. You have to have business skills. You have to know management. You have to know social media, digital marketing, which is a nightmare in the cannabis world. So I'm here. I came by because I urged Community Board 12 to pass a resolution to discuss this. We took this up 2 years ago or 3 years ago in the health committee because we recognize that in our district, like Community Board 12, you can't walk a block without smelling cannabis. People are self-medicating. They're not getting high. They're not breaking the law. They're using this to medicate. We have to break stigma. You have to talk about it. You have to talk about it in your health committee. You have to talk about it in your seniors committee. You have to get everybody's opinion. I've been advocating with Melissa, with Emily, we've been to Albany, but when you are talking communities of color in theory, as an advocate is very different than when you're in a community board room with the community and with women who go to church who are going to give you a lot of opinions of misinformation. Like there's a lot of misinformation. You're going to have to re-educate your community bilingually. En español y inglés, because let me tell you, la comunidad latina has a big stigma. And I'm in the CBD business, and we need to do this because they need to stop using pharmaceuticals, and we need to educate them on the benefits and break the stigma. So I urge Community Board 12, look at our resolution, which was kind of started with the base of the Smart Start letter or the Smart Start Coalition. They have a letter. We kind of looked at that, and I kid you not when I say we argued and debated, and I got laughed at in the general board meeting, got high fives, but it was not an easy process to discuss as a community of color. We're all thinking that communities of color are all for this. You have to talk with everyone, because this is going to impact everyone, and everyone's opinion matters. And sometimes the people who you think aren't your allies in this will teach you the most of what's missing in this. So look at the letter we did, which we got criticism that it was too inclusive. I won't say by who, but I urge you to look at it and to just adapt it for what works for your community, because that's the power we have as a community board. We're speaking for a whole zip code in New York City of what we want. And if we don't say what we want, I think it was Cassandra that said it, if you don't say what you want, you're gonna end up on the menu. You're gonna show up, and instead of being served, you're gonna be on the menu. So
thank you so much, Miriam. And
do it.
As a matter of fact, before we go into the elected officials, Francisco, I want to give Curtis Young some time to speak. Curtis is the chair of public safety. And I think, like you said, right, the power in this is being able to hold cross collaborations amongst the different committees and being able to get as much public information out, but also public dialogue to be able to move this conversation forward. So Curtis, you got 1 minute, brother.
Well, before Curtis starts, I just want to know that Angela Fernandez from the public has been raising her hand for a while.
She got it. We'll get to her we'll get to her in the next round. All right.
What am I saying?
Oh, you don't know what
Was
you're
there
saying?
questions?
All right, cool.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay. No. I'm here. I want to first of all thank you, Domingo, for putting this together. It is a great conversation that we should be having. I'm looking forward to working with the Business Development Committee to make sure that we're fighting for the equity piece. That's something that's really, really important. I reviewed the legislation and saw that there were some things that would penalize the businesses, would cause additional incarceration of business owners, and cause them to lose their licenses, and it would not be very justice driven in its current form. So I'm looking at reading that more and working with you to come up with maybe some sort of joint support on how we can move forward with ensuring equity, the equity piece. That's all I want to say.
All right, perfect. Like I said, we'll ground our conversation more on equity, criminalization, and economic justice. So like that, we could potentially get the health committee in, and we do a great follow up. Francisco, is on to you, brother.
And aging.
And aging.
Perfect. Okay, guys, so we're gonna move on to our.
Sorry. Something I did not mention before, it's definitely in the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, but is not in the governor's bill, is home grow, which is super important. New Jersey actually legalized without home grow, and home grow is definitely an access issue for both medical patients and even folks in the adult use industry that won't necessarily have the money to be able to purchase marijuana. And it's also a way for people who, if they're not able to access the legal industry for some reason or form, are able to still be able to get their medicine.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. So we're gonna hold public questions till after the local officials talk. Each local official and state official will have up to 5 minutes to tell us what they think of the proposed cannabis bills. We're going to start with Brad Usher, Chief of Staff of Senator Liz Krueger. Hey, Brad.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me. So what I'm going to do, I think Melissa and Emily and Christina gave some of the things that they think are better about MRTA than CERTA. I will just say I agree that our bill is better since it's our bill. I will also say we worked a lot with the governor's staff, including Jason when he was there and Axel Burnaby, and there were many good ideas that came out of that made MRTA a much better bill. And so when we first introduced this back in 2013, it was a very different, much more narrowly tailored and not as an effective bill as it is now. And some of that has been things we've learned from the advocates. Some of it has been things we've learned from working with the governor's staff on how you would actually create an agency, something that I think it's safe to say was a little beyond my ability to figure out. And so it's definitely a collaboration. I do think particularly on the issues of back-end equity and recriminalization of communities most impacted, to take two of the areas that Jason talked about, there are really significant fundamental differences between MRTA and CERTA, and that those are likely to be sticking points as we move forward with negotiations. So what I think I want to do is just talk about where I think things are. The majority leader, Peoples-Stokes, was quoted last week saying that she thinks we should try to move MRTA prior to the budget. And Senator Krueger agrees completely. And I think the reason being that gives us, Senator Jackson was talking about not wanting this to be the last minute thing that gets negotiated at the last minute, and everything in the kitchen sink is being thrown in, and you're trying to figure out whether, what line 42 on page 312 means. If we can have something that the legislature has said we agree on, that will put us in a better position to fight over some of the issues where we disagree with the governor's folks. So in an ideal world, that's what I hope will happen. I don't know that it will. Both Senator Krueger and Assemblymember Peoples-Stokes do not get to decide whether that happens. That's a leadership decision after each House conferences the bill and decides they want to move it. But I'm certainly more optimistic this year, both because of what has happened in Jersey, which changes the ground. I mean, it means that if we choose not to legalize cannabis in New York, anybody who wants to buy legal cannabis will just get on the PATH train and go get their legal cannabis. And so, and we will lose the tax revenue, and we will not be addressing any of the wrongs done to communities impacted by the drug war. So that's not a winning game. It's whether you're the governor or whether you're Senator Krueger or whether you're Community Board 12. So that has changed, and also I think the both conferences, both houses have had time to think about this for some time now. Questions that they've had, which are still out there, are getting answered more, and some of the membership of the conference has changed too. We now in the Senate have more upstate members representing large cities that have similar problems. The Black and Latino communities in Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo have also been disproportionately impacted by the drug war, and their senators are interested in seeing those wrongs addressed as well. So I think I'll leave it there. It will in the end come down to having, whether we pass MRTA or on our own or not, there undoubtedly will be further negotiations with the governor over language. Just that's the way the process works. But we think that that's a good goal for the sponsors of the bill to try to move this bill earlier and sort of set the table for those negotiations for the budget, which is due April 1st.
Awesome. That was under 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm happy to take questions later for details about the bill too.
Awesome. Yes. Okay. Let's move on to.
Oh, and by the way, you should have told them, Francisco, they don't have to take the path. They could just cross the GW Bridge.
Yeah, for everyone living uptown, absolutely. Let's go to Assemblywoman Carmen de la Rosa in Orlando. Are you guys here?
I'm here. How are you?
Hey.
How are you all doing? Thank you
Hey,
for
Carmen.
having me tonight. Hi, how are you? So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Well, let me just say straightforwardly that I support the MRTA proposal, that we are working with coalitions like SMART, at Start Smart, and others that are focused on the equity component, that I am particularly interested in the harms, correcting the harms of the criminal justice system. As many of you know, I'm a member of the Corrections Committee, and it's been part of my priorities to make sure that we are addressing the issues of impact to Black and Brown communities. We know that, under the governor's proposal, some of the penalties will be harsher for criminal justice impacted communities. We also know that in the licensing and regulations, one of the things we want to see is the ability for people who have been directly impacted by the criminal justice system to have buy-in. And when we mean buy-in, we don't mean, they're going to be some rinky-dink employee, sorry for the slang, but we want to make sure that there's ownership, opportunities to generate wealth. We know that right now we are in a fiscally constrained budget with $15 billion gap. But if you think about the magnitude of the state budget, we're talking about $192 billion. And that means that these cuts cannot come on the backs of working class New Yorkers. And it also means that while we need to pass things like the MRTA, we can't rush through a process that's going to give us something that's going to cost more harm than good. I think that it is important for us to also remember that while we're trying to negotiate a budget process, we are introducing a progressive tax structure for our state that seeks to not only upend the inequities that have existed in our community kind of historically, but also that looks forward to bringing in just recovery for COVID. So it's not good enough to say, we're going to pass a bill that regulates or legalizes the cannabis industry. We have to do it the right way. And I believe that we have our fingers on the pulse. We have dedicated advocates that have been talking to the Black, Latino, Asian Caucus, the Subcommittee of Women of Color, which I happen to co-chair, the Puerto Rican Hispanic Task Force as well. And we're going to continue these conversations. For me, it's important that as someone who grew up in Washington Heights, who has seen my peers be negatively impacted by the prohibition of marijuana, that we have the opportunity to make sure that whatever we do pass isn't going to continue to exacerbate, you know, the impacts of the criminal justice system. One of the things that we are concerned about as well is the odor of marijuana, right, being used as a justification to stop and frisk or to target people in our communities. So as we roll this out and as we try to pass these bills, we also have to look at the long-term implications of what it means for our communities. And so for me, I'm one vote out of 150 in the assembly. Crystal Peoples-Stokes is our majority leader. She is also the champion for this legislation. She's been championing this probably before I don't want to say before I was born, but definitely way before I got to the legislature. And we have able champions, not only in Senator Liz Kruger, but also in Crystal Peoples-Stokes. Our chair of the health committee is Dick Gottfried. He represents Hell's Kitchen. He's someone that also has his pulse on the equity needs of our communities, as well as the health implications of the legalization of marijuana. And for me, it's a pleasure to just join you tonight, be able to listen to this conversation unfold. I agree. I think it was Liz Ritter and maybe Miriam who said that this conversation has to happen amongst all of our community. One of the things that we're going to battle in the legalization and regulation of this industry is information. Our community is diverse, not only in languages, but in beliefs. And I think it's important for us as elected officials to also have a plan of action to get this information to every single household in our districts in order to make sure that they have input in this process. And so I think that this is step one. This forum is step one in that process. And I look forward to joining you for steps 2, 3, and 5. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think one thing that Carmen says that's very important is the war on drugs. It seems like it's a jobs program, you know, on the backs of Black and brown people. And I want to quote Dr. Carl Hart. We have to oppressing Black and brown bodies and impoverished people's bodies shouldn't be a job opportunity. That's all.
Hey guys, so Natalie, can you speak for the
I think we have Al Taylor's chief of staff, if I'm not mistaken. Erica, you here?
Erica, yeah, I did see that. She can Erica, are you with us?
I'm here. I thank you guys for holding this. The assembly member, you know, was on. He wanted to just elaborate a little bit more. If given the opportunity in the future, he'll definitely just speak a little bit more about his stance. What I can tell you is that just to echo Assemblywoman Carmen De La Rosa's point, you know, he does support legislation that makes sense and that will create, you know, ownership for wealth, and also something that's not going to be rushed, right? It's something that we all collectively should work together to just materialize, to make sure that it's going to make sense for our community for sure. So thank you for just holding this space so that we all collectively can just, you know, voice and learn a little bit more and just see how it could be beneficial for all of us.
Erica, are you able to join for some Q&A as well?
I have to leave in a few minutes, but I'll stay as long as I can. Yes.
Okay. Domingo, what do you say?
All right, perfect. Is Natalie going to say something on behalf of the borough president?
Hey, good evening. Domingo, thank you. Thank you, Francisco. Thank you all for putting this together. I'm definitely here to listen.
Okay.
And we look forward to joining as this conversation continues. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Now we're coming to my portion, Francisco. So Q&A. So in the Q&A, we have Angela Fernandez.
Actually, let the public know that if they want to ask a question,
yeah, raise your hand.
Raise your hand.
There's the raise hand feature, and I will call you as I see them being raised. And we'll also try to answer as many of the Q&A questions that we can. If we don't get to it, I'll make sure to email answers out when we send out the blast on the information.
Great. Thank you so much. And really just so appreciative that you put this together. And Jason, you know, I'm a huge fan, so I love to be able to see you in action. So I just wanted to really highlight that during the war on drugs, and it still continues today, our community, our mostly Dominican community in Washington Heights, many of them were deported for marijuana convictions, as little as 2 marijuana cigarettes possession. And many times they were advised to take a plea deal. So we really need to be mindful of ensuring that as we're moving in this space, that we pressure the federal government to change laws so these people can come back. When you have a green card holder, also known as a legal permanent resident, that gets deported, they are typically being deported to a country where their immediate family is not there, because their immediate family are typically naturalized US citizens. And so I think that's one piece that I want to make sure that we don't forget throughout this process. With regard to the co-op, I'm so excited that there is already a co-op infrastructure around cannabis, and there is a New York City Council co-op initiative. It's a funded initiative that was only started a few years ago, and I just wanted to put out that it would be really interesting to see how the initiative can support these efforts. And then the final piece is that, clearly hearing some of the differences between MRDA and CERDA, I don't know if there's any way in which this in CB12 can formally support MRDA over CERDA, and if that's helpful in any way. So that's all I just wanted to contribute. And thank you again to everyone for putting this together.
Thank you. Thank you, Angela. Next, we have Hugo Collado.
You got 1 minute. Or whatever he starts talking. Hold on.
Hey, Hugo, you have to unmute.
Unmute. My bad. Hello?
Hey, what's up?
Oh, what up, bro? My bad. I didn't even think that you was gonna catch me. I just wanted to say that I really, really so much appreciate everything that you guys are saying right now. As somebody that has been impacted from the illegal side of it and everything, and just been lived in Dykeman my whole life. I'm 38 years old. I can tell you exactly how it's been, and I've seen the transition and how it works. As somebody that's savvy enough to see it all coming and coming fast, I really, really just want to say that I appreciate all you guys for giving us this type of information. Just in these couple of minutes, I've learned so much. I didn't even know that there was collectives or co-ops or anything like this that you can even be part of. And I just basically also wanted to ask, since I got the line or whatnot, how would you even go about if you're building your brand, but trying to build it in a way that, you really don't got very much things to use to market your things, or even go about even reaching out to other people without making it seem like funny? How would you go about that? I guess is what I'm asking, for lack of a better term. Like, how would you even jump in a community like this and be like, hey, my name is so-and-so, how you guys are doing, da-da-da, is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, that's a good question. Could we get a response to that?
I mean, it's one of the reasons why incubator programs are so important, and why upfront funding is critical to making this work. Because even if you're experienced in the illegal or the what I got to use the right terminology.
Underground
market. Legacy market. I knew there was a new term that I was supposed to use. Legacy. The legacy market. There are a lot of skills you're not going to have. And in that case, you may know who your customers are, but there may be other skills you need. For somebody entering other parts of their market, they may not know who their customers are and how to reach them and what to do. So providing technical assistance and providing money up front, both as capital for investment, but also to fund the programs and to figure out how how to use community-based organizations that already exist in the community to connect people to the industry is also going to be critical.
I just want to add, like, I'm in the CBD business, and when Colorado went legal, I came to New York and I was like, I need to get in this space. How am I going to learn about this? Just start Googling. I joined Women Grow back in like 2015, and I started to go to every single webinar, workshop, conference. I went to Canna Gather. Like, start Googling how to get into the legal cannabis industry. Look up the minorities in cannabis. There's associations. The Harlem Business Alliance does, like, there's so many places, but you have to know business. Just because this is cannabis, you have to know business. Start taking small business workshops. Like, just start learning, and community boards, we need to provide workshops.
I want to add quickly too, I think just going into community and starting conversations, see where people are interests are, see what needs the community has, just like the Young Lords did back in the day, you know, create a survey, go to your community, start talking to people, like, what do you need? What do you want to see in the marijuana industry? See if you find like-minded folks that want to build with you. And there's a lot of business incubator programs in the city. Small Business Services does business incubator programs. If you wanted to be a cooperative, you know, NICNOC provides a training series on how you can start your own worker cooperative business. We do work with Take Root Justice and CUNY Law. They provide free attorneys to help you with your business incorporation. I'm even familiar with other universities that also have courses where legal students can help you with your business formation for free. And then there's also startup funding for co-ops specifically. I don't know about other types of business type. I know Miriam was able to access a grant and she wants to talk about that a little, but there are business investment groups for cooperatives and community development financial institutions that have grant money to fund worker cooperative businesses. We also have a public bank campaign in New York City.
So what I'll do is I'll make sure I follow up, but we got to give everybody the ability to ask their questions. So what I'll do is I'll make sure that when we send out the information that you get it. All right.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, Christina, your attitude and your energy is so awesome. Yo, so awesome, good ass. Everything that you spoke, you literally had me like thinking and even going somewhere else that practically I didn't even think about it. I honestly, you guys, just in the conversation that you guys had so far, you really did open my mind to a lot of things that I really, really did not know was even going on right under our noses. And I'm very familiar with what Domingo does. So I just want to say shout out to Domingo for always shining a light somewhere, bro. Real life.
Bro, this is a community effort, bro, and I'm following Francisco right now. Like, I'm not even.
And shout out to Francisco.
But Francisco's from the Heights too, and he's like I said, this is the ability for us to be able to engage our community in conversations that our community wants to have. All we're doing is we're the vessels, bro.
Nah, thank you so much. Trust me, all this info is much needed, man. And if anything, if just in the questions and Q&As, if anybody got something that we could be part of or I could join some way somehow, please let me know. I'm signing up right now.
Right, cool. On that note, right now, I was about to say the Start Smart Coalition. Everybody is talking about the community, the advocacy piece. All of it lines up together within Start Smart. So folks who want to get updates all the time on Twitter, it's at StartSmartNY, or you could go to smart-ny.com for the website, and there's all the info right there. We have like a quick tool where you can immediately call your legislator, tweet at them, send them an email just with one click. It's super easy. So you can just tap into that conversation. And also we're having a lobby day this Thursday, specifically focused on the ongoing criminalization and the proposal that's on the table from the governor and how it's insufficient and unacceptable and how we need the MRTA to move. So if folks want to connect up with that, just again, go to at StartSmartNY. And you can get connected up for all the lobby day info.
And just do me the favor to make sure that the emails are
Thank you so much.
And you will receive all this information within 2 days.
And Hugo, you already know your legislator. It's Carmen.
You already know. Carmen, we from the same building. You better stop that, 5.
All right, cool. So up next, we have Sharon Cannon.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Oh, okay. It's so good to see you back in the room, Jason. I haven't seen you in a while. Used to see you downtown in all the events back in the day. Good to see you too, Christina, and some of the others, and Melissa. We've all been on the front line together at some point. My concern is basically the NYJA. We need to figure out our federal housing residents. Our federal housing residents are losing their apartments and they're holding cards, medical cards for medical marijuana. I understand that Liz has something in her proposal. I'm not sure to what extent, but I would like to hear a little bit more about that, because that is one of the largest concerns that we have here in New York. Not only that, also children being taken away from card holders as well. So frontline, I've been out here for a long time, and I just want to make sure that we get New York right, because if we could be the example for the country, then we've done some great work.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Could somebody answer her question 1 minute, please? We're at 8:30. Let's try to finish the meeting by 8:40. We usually do an hour and a half, with the understanding that there will be other follow-up sessions where we will be able to engage our community in a much more deeper and in a much more deeper level.
I'll give the really quick one. There is language in MRTA to deal with what are called collateral consequences in housing and custody cases and things like that. There are complications with NYCHA because of federal regulations, however, which we don't really have the ability to override, which is one reason why social consumption sites are going to be really important. Because I mean, we can hope that the federal government will get rid of some of their regulations, but there are dangers there that are beyond the ability of MRTA to control.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So is there another bill that's in just like protection for NYJA tenants? Because I heard it was sting.
I believe
because this is what I'm on the soapbox about quite a bit. Christina knows we're in Clubhouse together.
Yeah. Right. Clubhouse is amazing.
If you need an invite, I got 4 this week, so let me know.
Oh, go ahead, Christina.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say there is a standalone bill that deals with housing protections, both for medical patients as well as people in the adult use space. Once we get into that, that was really intended to be kind of like a backstop or like a protection if the broader comprehensive marijuana legalization bill did not move forward, that there would be the need to provide those specific remedies within standalone legislation. But assuming that the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act is what moves forward, then those protections are built into the very framework of the bill itself. And so, there's language specifically stating that it is the explicit intent of the state of New York that marijuana use should not be used to negatively impact any individual's access to housing, employment, that there shouldn't be parole or probation impacts for people, nor should it impact family unity or parental rights. And so all of that is laid out really prescriptively and really clearly within the MRTA, not in the governor's proposal though.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Vanessa Perez.
Hey, hi guys, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Hi, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak. First and foremost, I just want to say that I'm so grateful to be on this call and see so many faces that I recognize. Emily, Miriam, Christina, we don't know each other like personally, yet we've all met in different spaces. I've been kind of wedging my way into the cannabis industry since the spring of 2019. At first as an entrepreneur, and then after doing what Miriam says, I actually took advice from her and I started going to all these events, and I went to a few of the like seminars and stuff. I started to notice a trend, which is that a lot of while the talk of equity and inclusion and diversity exists in the cannabis industry, where you don't see it is at the top level, right? Or even within the infrastructure of the company, right? So like, for example, I am an HR director by trade, and I've yet to meet an HR person in the cannabis industry that is a person of color, female, or Latina. So my question to the folks that are here, to the legislators that are on this call, to the gentlemen that are on this call that I'm sure I've crossed you in the street because I've lived in the Heights my whole life, is as we talk about building the infrastructure of what cannabis is going to look like within our community, right? Not the legacy industry, but rather the legal market. How are we engaging like the business component of it, right? Like how are we ensuring that while the folks that need to build businesses in our community have a pool of talent that exists within the community that understands the needs of the community, right? So like, how can I, as an HR director, market myself to potential employers within my community? I would much rather lend my services and my expertise and my love for equity to someone who looks like me, who sounds like me, whose story is similar to me, than to Columbia Care, whose vice president I heard speak at an event last week, who said, everyone's so concerned about their share of the pie. We should be focused on the size of the pie. And that, like, it infuriated me because I know that big business already has their pie, their slice, like already carved out. So to them, it's like, yeah, the bigger the pie, the more I get. I don't want to, like, I find myself struggling with wanting to enter the industry in a way so that I can impact change, right, on an equitable level. And also, I don't want to work for yet another white company that does not care about my community. So how do we bridge that gap? Also, I'm here to volunteer for anyone that's looking for, like, you know, community advocacy. I talk to my parents about cannabis all the time in Spanish. So I'm learning language on how to help. You know, I'm here for all of it. Yeah, that's my minute, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. So her question was more about, I'm assuming, the smoke and mirrors that some corporations do, right? Where they'll
Vanessa, I'm just going to jump in. You sound like an entrepreneur, like you need to take your skill set and transfer it into that space and start like an HR business for Latinos and people of color to work in the cannabis industry. I tell you because I showed up at my first Women Grow with my iPad, with my graphic designer portfolio. I wanted to work in the cannabis industry, designing for people. And you know what? The more you dig into the cannabis industry, the more you found out how it wasn't equitable and how uncool it was. And you start your own business. It's going to be hard, but you start your own business. That's why this is happening. This is only going to happen once in our lifetime. And it's an opportunity for our community and people like us to start something from scratch.
Yeah.
So
if I could just chime in on something, I think from the government perspective, you know, already in Albany last year, we were getting lobbied by people who were representing big corporations that were coming in to our state to try and get a piece of that pie that you're talking about, Vanessa. And you know, the guys who I met with, the guy who pulled me off the floor, you know, in Albany, they pull you off the floor to have conversations. His jaw dropped when I said to him, you know, he made sure to open with, and our CEO is African American. And I said to him, I said, congratulations for tokenizing a Black man to lead your business. How much in stock does he own? What is his equity stake in your business? We don't want titles. We want wealth. We want to generate wealth. And I think that that's also, there's a responsibility for government to ensure that, you know, some of the lapses that we've seen in programs like MWBEs, where white women will be the fronts for their husbands' businesses in order to get procurement contracts through the state, don't happen in this industry. So I wanted to specifically touch on that point, but I want to echo the motivation that our sister Miriam has given to you. I think that from what you're saying, you have a great focus and a niche, which is human resources. where you can certainly make a business for yourself. So I'm gonna encourage that. I'm gonna give you encouraging vibes on that.
I appreciate. Can you also hear me?
Can I add one thing there? The other thing, Vanessa, that's important is those guardrails that we were talking about. So, as you are talking to your elected officials, your policymakers, and other folks who might be advocating, I really think a big issue in terms of previous states that, maybe put a good effort into social equity, but didn't actually see or haven't seen the results of the program is that they really didn't put up guardrails to give people time to ideate, to connect, to root their businesses, to get the incubation services, the technical assistance that they need, and the hunger to actually go from having a bill to like opening the first dispensary, I think really clouded the good practice of, saying, let's wait, let's put those other folks to the side right now, and let's focus on our social equity applicants, let's focus on our social equity programs, and let's only do the work of licensing and operationalizing this bill for those people, and everybody else has got to wait. And I think it's really politically challenging. And so, it's social equity in word and then social equity in deed. And I think we're in a place in New York right now where those are the kinds of things we have to put in front of these policymakers and say they didn't work, and we can't make those same mistakes. So I think guardrails, I think time for you to really root yourself in the industry is going to be critically important to meeting with success as the market develops.
Yeah, so thank you. Up next, we have Freddie Ruiz. Go ahead, Freddie. You have to unmute. All right, Freddie, do you hear us? Going once, going twice. He's been very active in the chat.
While you're getting the next person ready, I just wanted to add really quickly to Vanessa to uplift everything that everyone was saying. I definitely think that starting your own business would be great. I think that human resources is a big need in the marijuana industry and also even in the co-op industry.
Yeah, I
and
think you're muted.
you can start right now because it's an ancillary business. It doesn't have anything to do with plant touching. It is a business you could start incubating and start right now so that when marijuana does legalize, you're ready to start your business because you have your bank account, your business structure, your business documents, and everything ready. So I definitely would encourage that.
All right.
Domingo, may I respond to something real quick?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Natalie. I didn't even.
That's okay. I was raising my hand, but I don't know how visible it is to you. I just wanted to quickly say, because I hear a lot of people talk about their lifelong connection to the Heights and how they want to get involved. And Manhattan Community Board applications, deadline February 22nd for new applicants. So if this is a body that it's not everybody's jam, I know. There are a lot of other groups that you can connect with, but if this is the conversation that you want to join and be a deeper part of it and have more ownership over it, then please go to Manhattan bp.nyc.gov. I'll try to put the application link in the chat if I can.
Okay. Freddie's back. Freddie, can you... Are you hear us, Freddie? All right. I guess you're having technical difficulties. We can't hear you. I'm going to go on to the next person. Going once, twice. All right. Lulu. Lulu.
Hey, hi, it's Lulu Sway. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Lulu.
My partner Jacoby is on the line too, but we run a cannabis education platform specifically for groups that look like us. So Black, Brown, Indigenous, underrepresented women. And we do attract quite a number of really good people. Jacoby and I are very good connectors. We do have experience in existing markets. I'm from Washington, he's from Colorado. So we've been actually bringing people into New York to meet with the professionals in the communities who are interested in cannabis. So to Hugo, if you're still on, please do check out our group. We're facilitating an East Coast specific cannabis education platform. conversations in cannabis similar to this with existing licensees all of February. So please do join us. We provide a lot of free seminars specifically to educate our community. So please join our community when you want. Thank you. That's all. Hi, Jason. We miss you. Jason actually has been part of is part of our community and has spoken at one of our in-person events back in the day. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining us, Lulu. Now we have Freddie Ruiz keeps trying. I'm gonna keep trying with him. Freddie. All right, I promoted you to panelist, Freddie, to see if that works. Let's see if that works. Can you hear us?
I hear all of you. Do you hear me?
Now we hear you. That worked.
Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm actually using an iPhone 4. It still works, so I get rid of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, what's up? So talk to us, man.
Oh man, thank you everybody. Thanks for being patient with me. Washington Heights native also my whole life. Just curious because being from Washington Heights, you know, they always said Washington Heights is the home of the haze, home of everything. Can't deny it, right? We have a lot of things in place. It's a community. Everyone knows everyone, correct? Now, we have, our neighborhoods are changing. If you go anywhere between 145th and 231st, it's a whole different community. No one knows anyone, which is cool. It's a part of life. With marijuana coming into the culture, it's becoming more accepting. Everyone is trying to become more lucrative off of it. I'm seeing that what happens to the neighborhoods, what happens to the people that already have something in play, like the corner boys or the bodega owners who might be getting some money from the corner boy because they're protecting them. Or now I also start asking myself, how are these people going to be kept protected? Excuse my my tone because I'm walking back and forth while I'm talking. I'm also wondering, as for someone who is a native of Washington Heights, when these big companies come in, let's say Coca-Cola, let's say all these other pharmacies that want to now jump on the wave because they know it's a tax write-off, are these people now going to be held accountable for putting in money to fixing my neighborhood? My neighborhood has been affected by more drug wars than any other neighborhood I could say in New York City. Are there going to be programs in place to protect my friends, to get the people that got deported, like they said earlier, because they were smoking a dime of weed? Are these companies going to put money to protect the people and to have rent-stabilized apartments that stay there? Because everyone knows once marijuana comes in play, all the other taxes go up, and now the neighborhood starts going up in surge with rent, with real estate, and now our beautiful home of Washington Heights now becomes like every other great city in the world. And I think Washington Heights is unique in its own way.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Freddie. That's it?
Yeah, so far.
All right, cool. So I think Freddie tapped into the equity perspective, and I also think one of the most important like recurring theme is how do we protect individuals who already put themselves in this front line to be able to get not a piece of the pie, but to get a key stake within this entire movement.
Yes. Also, like the laws, what are they going to do to protect the people that were affected before? Are there going to be now laws that are going to go in? Are there going to be programs to protect them? Or how about the people that also need credit? Because I could go right now to Flacco and tell Flacco, yo, I'm short $20. My back is hurting. I don't want to go do a perk right now. Can you give me a 20 a week? And Flacco's going to tell me, yes, I don't want you to do a perk either. I don't want you to do opioids. Here, take a 20 a week and solve your back problem. So that's what I'm wondering. Our communities are actual communities. Like everyone is in play with each other. So when you guys come talk about Washington Heights, you guys talking about legalizing marijuana in New York City. Washington Heights is the front of everything.
Yeah.
And I am an advocate of my neighborhood. I love my neighborhood.
We all love it, Freddie. I grew up in 189 in Audubon.
Hey, 190 Audubon right next to you.
Yeah, so
one thing I can just mention about the MRTA is in its equity program, it includes a provision that people who have either been working and had convictions related to marijuana, or had family members who had convictions related to marijuana are tiered at a higher, there's sort of two tiers of equity, and that's the highest tier of equity. So it's that one of the goals is to provide a route for those people to enter the legal market. And then of course the programs that I talked about earlier are they're eligible for, and they're supposed to be privileged in getting licenses based on that.
Kruger, I always thank you first off because I've been following you for the last 10, I think probably the last 5-6 years. You've been speaking very much for New York to have it recreational, to have it legalized for people like myself to be able to have home use so we can grow it and not have to depend on the streets. So I want to thank you for that. But when you say about the apartments, you see, like, let's say Queensbridge, you see how Amazon was coming in there. How are we going to prevent a big Amazon for pharmacy for weed from coming in, destroying our neighborhood without them giving back, putting work that guarantees we have to work in our neighborhood?
No, that's exactly right. So I want to speak a little bit like on that point to what Jason was talking about before on the framework, right, of what's actually going to be codified in the legislation, because that's where you have different license types and different also those guardrails and those protections, right, to make sure that it's not just all the big folks swooping, but very much to what Brad from Senator Kruger's office was just highlighting, right, that there are specific mechanisms within both the social equity language within the MRTA that Senator Kruger sponsors along with the majority leader, that are really clear about centering and forefronting people who have been directly impacted and also communities that have been, right? In terms of being able to have access to the market and really being prioritized in terms of moving forward and getting the resources that folks might need, right? Like we know what this would be if it just was a bunch of corporations swooping through and displacing all of the folks that have been operating in this space, exactly from what you're talking about, the community fabric point of view, but then also just the local economy piece of it too, right? Like you can't just take that away from folks, especially for people who have had prior contact with the criminal legal system and have been blocked out from so many other employment opportunities, right? Like this has been an avenue for survival, for well-being for a lot of folks within the community. So you can't just take that away. And that's one of the biggest differences between what Senator Kruger's bill does and the governor's proposal. His proposal will continue to criminalize people. It doesn't provide for the type of resentencing, clearing out records, reclassifying stuff for people based on the penalties that will shift once we move into legalization. And it also blocks people who have a prior felony conviction from even participating in the legal market, which is absurd, right? Like it should be like you have this expertise, like you should be able to participate unless you have something that's business related. That's a conviction, like not like that shouldn't be a thing, right? And so being really clear about the frameworks and the prioritization for folks that are actually from communities to be building that up. And then in terms of preventing folks from swooping in, I would say, that's where the community board has a lot of jurisdiction over like the time, location, and manner, the zoning implications, all of that will be things that will be dictated in large part by community boards and by local input, shaping what it actually looks like on the ground in the streets in terms of how legalization comes to pass. But we have to get that framework right. Otherwise, you don't have those tools necessarily. And the community reinvestment piece, right? Like what we were talking about before.
No, everything you just said touched based on everything. I just want to make sure that there are laws put in place because, like you said, this is something new that's going on. So we only have one chance on making it right. So if we hold the community accountable, if we hold the industry accountable, and then we hold our legislators, Carmen De La Rosa, Kruger, everyone else who is a part of this, who wants to be a part of this, then we have to make sure that these other companies don't keep destroying the heart of New York City. I mean, it's cool. Bring everyone to New York City, honestly, bring the whole world, but don't take away from New York City. That's just my.
And I thank you so much. And you see perspectives like this, Freddie, is what like Natalie, I'm gonna reiterate what she said, is always welcome in the board because we're always looking for individuals who are invested in their community, who want to amplify their voice and their experience within the community to make sure that we get things right. So what I'll do is I put my email. If you could see, my email is dejrcb12m@gmail.com, dejrcb12m@gmail.com, or on Instagram, Domingo Estevez. Let's follow up and let's keep using that same energy to put ourselves in positions where we amplify what the community needs, not what some certain individuals putting out what they think the community needs. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank
you. Thank you for taking. Thank you for keep trying and letting me get on. The iPhone, it still works. Why get rid of it?
Part of accessibility and equity, right? We got to go the extra mile to make sure everybody's heard, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that being said, I want to, Francisco, some closing remarks. I want to give, let me see if one of our partners is still here. I think she left to provide an announcements. But if anybody has any announcements, any closing remarks, this is the time. Let's try to keep it to at least a minute or two. We've already gone 24 minutes over, but the conversation has been so constructive that at this point, there's only so much I could do. But let's just keep our remarks short. Let us know where, let individuals know where they could reach you. And yeah.
I just wanted to say to Freddie, also, don't wait on big corporations and their tax reinvestment into our communities. I think that we should be making the money ourselves and investing in our own communities, buying land, starting housing cooperatives. We don't need to depend on the government for rent stabilized houses. We should own our land. We should own our homes. We should own our businesses. We should own our access to our food supply and our medicine. And we can do that all through worker cooperatives. You can find me at Jaime Madre or email me at jaimemadre@gmail.com. Thank you.
Jason, anyone else would like to have some closing remarks?
I mean, it's just a great conversation. I'm grateful to be in community with all these people. I would just, close by saying, kind of building from the last comment, like we've been here before in the not so recent past, and I'll just direct people's attention to the lotto. And what the state did in sort of taking the numbers out of community and taking it over and creating a lotto. And we have a roadmap for what happens when there are promises made about what tax and regulate could potentially mean, and those promises weren't kept and met. So I do think that the legislature and the governor have a responsibility to get this right. And if they can't get it right, then we shouldn't do it, because it will have a really, really negative impact on a community that's already been harmed and been targeted. So everybody has something to contribute here. And, certainly with all of this expertise and experience with the strength of community, we're in a moment right now, especially coming, sort of dealing with COVID and thinking about recovering from COVID, where small business, community-oriented business, community came together and solved problems and met needs where government and industry could not. And it just only reinforces the point that this has to be done with community at the center. So I'm really grateful to be with you virtually. Didn't have to cross the river and come up from Brooklyn in person, but definitely when the outside opens up, looking forward to sharing more personal time with you. You can find me across all the social media platforms at Jason E as in Edward Star, JASONESTARR. Be blessed, be well, and stay safe.
Jason. Brad from Senator Liz Cruz's office, can you send us off with any way that we can support the bill, or what can we do as citizens to help push this along?
Yeah, I mean, one thing is working with the Start Smart campaign, as they are our allies and our experts. And, we talked about, I've met with so many people on cannabis over the last 3 years since this started taking off. I've noticed that the groups that they send to meet with me now are slightly less white and male than they were when they started coming 3 years ago, but they're still pretty white and male. And the idea of tokenism for those who aren't there is definitely something that crosses my mind. So it's very important that the voices of the community are coming to the legislators as well. And I agree completely with what Jason said. It's more important to get it right this year than to get it done this year. I really want to get this done. I've been working on this for a long time, but we can't rush something through that we regret later on. And my email is usher@nysenate.gov, or the Liz Kruger email is lkruger@nysenate.gov if you want to share additional thoughts with me.
And Brad, you're always welcome to come back and provide any updates. We welcome you. Your insight and your language, because sometimes, when you invite allies, they sometimes say certain things, and I appreciate the fact that you really checked in and made sure that the language was also appropriate.
Thank you.
Melissa, can you send us off?
Sure. Yeah, just really quickly appreciate again the opportunity to be here, connecting with folks, sharing community virtually. Just really encourage people if you want a way to plug in right now. We have a lobby day happening this Thursday on the 4th. It'll be virtual, so it'll be COVID compliant and safe. They haven't opened the Capitol back up to advocates yet. I think they're probably going to delay that as long as possible, so we're not, chanting through the hallways as we used to all the time. But we can still, we can pivot, we can recalibrate and organize digitally. It actually makes it easier for a lot of people to connect. You don't have to take a whole day off of work to go up to Albany. You can just, check in at various points on your day. So again, hit us up. I put the handle for our social media with my name right here. It's at Start Smart NY, or you could go to the website. It's smart-ny.com. That's where all of the info is of how you can connect up with our campaign and be part of the effort. And then, just really, again, appreciate everything that folks have said and underscored, specifically around equity and community reinvestment being the central pillars of what we need in New York to get marijuana justice.
Awesome. Carmen, or Orlando, are you still with us?
She had another Zoom, so she had to
Yeah.
step out.
Yes, I am. The assembly member had another engagement that she had to join. But we look forward to continuing working with the community board.
Okay.
And with Domingo and Francisco, thanks for inviting us, and thank you for this great conversation, pushing the envelope forward to make sure that our community understands the ramifications of what transpired, and also what could potentially we can achieve as a collective. So thank you very much for having us.
And also welcome to join us any month. Any updates, you're welcome to join us any month.
Also, I see we have Assemblyman Al Taylor here with us.
He had to step out. I think he just stayed.
No, he's here.
Yeah, he's right there waving at us.
Can you unmute yourself?
Hey, good evening. Thank you all so much. I had an emergency that I did have to step out for. Domingo, thank you so much. I look forward to working with you, and being attentive and responsive. Thank you all so much. I think this was wonderful. This is the type of work that is needed to inform those folks out on the street that are moving bags, that think that it's going to be legal and they're going to make a whole lot of money. But if you're unequipped, unprepared, and we don't do a good job in landing this thing right, it's just going to be something that happens and we miss the bus. So I am signed on this piece of legislation. I support this legislation. But if the Black communities that did not get their fair shake, and all of those almost 1 million people that were arrested, I know 1 million people are not coming back for this money, but we have to do right by them. And I don't want to go back to that zip code that has been re-identified and give them a tank full of money. You have to be very careful in the language, and I don't want to deal with this bill at midnight before it needs to be signed in the 800 pages. We got to figure out what's in this jungle, because y'all gonna look at us like we crazy. So there's a lot to do, and I think what's his name from Senator Kruger's office, I heard him say it's better to get it right than to get it passed this year. And I think that's what's important. And remember, this was not a revenue enhancing bill when it was introduced. Now it's caught up that we need revenue bill. Yeah, let's tax the hell out of the rich, and then we can come back and do this later. That's just my theory.
Yeah,
Thank you all
because
so much. Good night. God bless you.
yeah, like I said, the U.S. war, the U.S. drug war on drugs has been a job program. It's time to start shutting that complex down.
Can we end with Christina, or is there another speaker that I'm forgetting?
Could Jason just, can you give us your Twitter again? Because I just went to follow you on Twitter, and let's just say the picture of the guy who's at Jason STARR.
We got
is
you,
not
Liz. We got you. Let's move the agenda. It's 9:04.
Jason E. Star. You missed the
Thank
E
you.
for Edward, yeah.
Go ahead, Francisco.
Okay, Christina, floor is yours.
Well, thank you again for inviting me here tonight. This was super exciting for me. Change happens at this level, right? Change starts at this level, because this level you start to galvanize and unify voices. And as we've seen in Massachusetts, just even recently, they were able to flip a lawsuit on its head within a matter of days. And so the buy-in from communities, getting those people to participate and constantly recharging the environment and the conversation in things like this is what's going to pass the most sensible legislation. So continue to show up if I can be of assistance to anyone. I'm at CB Council. I put it in my little, I guess, what is that? My little bio underneath my photo. And every Wednesday, I think we might move it to Tuesday, but it'll be tomorrow. I run a clubhouse meeting. Clubhouse, that's right.
Oh, I'm following you there too.
And we talk about just the legislation in New York and New Jersey. This isn't a sell. It's not how to get into the industry. It's just straight up what the law is saying, differences between the bills. And we do draw upon our experience in other jurisdictions. So you know where to find me every Wednesday night for now. Thank you again for having us.
I mean, thank you, everyone, all the speakers. You guys really provided so much information. And I think when we speak about access, we also speak about information, and you guys are giving us that. And was it Frank? What was his name?
Ooh.
He spoke so enthusiastic about, Hugo. He's so enthusiastic about receiving this information. And he's not a specific, he is part of the general public. A lot of them feel that way. A lot of them they don't know nothing. They have nothing. There's no end. So you guys are providing that, and I really appreciate that. And Domingo, thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate you.
So now we're gonna we got Emily. Well, let's let Miriam speak, because I'm like, Miriam, I don't know what you signed up for, but we're gonna be hitting you up nonstop to get that support.
No problem, man. I'm here.
Yeah.
I was actually born on Dyckman, yo. My first apartment was Dyckman and Post. My dad had a bodega on Nagel. So my heart is in Washington Heights. I live in Hamilton Heights, but I'm all about uptown.
You're still in the Heights.
I'm still in the Heights. You can't leave. You can move out of the Heights, but the Heights doesn't move out of you.
Yeah, cool. Appreciate
But I'm here,
so
like you have to talk with the community, as you could see. And what we're learning on Community Board 9 is we have to hit the streets, boots on the ground. Like, we have to do like old school guerrilla marketing. We're going to start using their link kiosks. We're doing wellness walks if we have to. Like, during COVID, our committee's been hitting the neighborhood, because we realize, yeah, everybody has phones and stuff, but you got to hit the people up with the free newspapers uptown, El Especialito, run ads as community boards. We got to get creative right now. Like, it's time for us to be more proactive. And, I'm here. I'll partner with you guys. Like, we've been working together a lot. COVID has really forced us community boards to work harder. And I think it's good. And yes, the applications are open now. If you want to say in this, get on your community board, because I've heard that they're going to treat this a lot like the liquor license application process. And guess what? That comes through community board. Everything comes through community board. It's not for everybody, but it is fun, and you do get involved in making your community. So get involved, show up.
And Emily, close us out, sister.
Thank you so much, Domingo, for inviting us to this conversation. I appreciate it so much. This is very important conversation we need to have, and we need to continue having to make sure that we have a stake in the marijuana industry and that we're not left out. And I just want to amplify what everyone is saying. If we can't get it right this year, we shouldn't pass it this year. It's more important that we get the bill right, that everybody's voices are heard, and we're making sure the money goes to the right places. And if anybody needs any information about co-ops, you want to start your own co-op, hit me up. Hi, mi madre. Thank you.
And with that being said, can I hear the motion?
Second.
No, I haven't motioned. Motion to what? Just say it. So
Motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
Oh, I'm not on your board.
Second.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And thank you all. This is just the beginning, and we're gonna keep building community. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you. It was amazing, Domingo and Francisco.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Big up to the Heights.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Paola. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.